Okay, so thank you for joining us for Pink Panther Presents an Author Talk with Cynthia Harrison and Linda Sienkiewicz. I'm going to open up with their bios, and then Linda's going to introduce me. Okay, so let me see. Why is this in? Linda Sienkiewicz is a poet, artist, novelist, and most recently, a children's book author and illustrator. Her poetry, art, and short stories have appeared in numerous literary journals and anthologies. Her novel, In the Context of Love, has 5 finalist awards. Linda also has 4 poetry chapbooks, a chapbook award, and a Pushcart Prize nomination. Her MFA is from Stone Coast. Gordy and the Ghost Crab is her first picture book. Cynthia Harrison published her first book, Your Words, Your Story, in 2007 for her creative writing students at Macomb Community College. The print edition sold out, but the book lives on in an updated version on Kindle. It has hit #1 on numerous Kindle lists over the years. Cindy's contemporary fiction, including the popular Blue Lake series, is published by the Wild Rose Press. Cindy's novels feature strong female characters, whether in her early women's fiction novels or more recently her mysteries, Blue Lake Christmas Mystery, 2016, Lily White in Detroit, 2018, and her latest, 2020, Jane in St. Pete, the first in a new series. Since 2002, Cindy has posted a blog every week to her website at www.cynthiaharrison.com. She currently is offering a free PDF short story, The Charming Criminal, a prequel to her latest novel. She and her husband live in Michigan and Florida. They have 2 sons and 3 grandchildren.
Okay. All right. Teaching writer and assault trauma advocate Jenifer DeBellis, MFA, is author of Blood Sisters, Main Street Rag, 2018, and founding director of A Rift Warrior Project. She hopes to release her second book, Warrior Sister, Cut Yourself Free from Your Assault, in 2020. In addition to publishing and promoting her poetry and prose, she edits Pink Panther magazine and directs the Detroit Writers Guild. When she's not editing or writing for others, she sneaks in time for her own craft, which was nominated for a 2018 Pushcart Prize and appears in AWP's Festival Writer, Calyx, The Good Men Project, Literary Orphans, Solstice, and other fine journals. A former Meadowbrook Writing Project Fellow, Jenifer facilitates workshops for Oakland University's MBWP writing camps, as well as teaches writing and literature for Saginaw Valley State University and Macomb Community College.
All right. So I'm just looking on the page here, trying to find, trying to make sure we're going strong. So, give me 1 second just to make sure, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It was going a second ago and I don't see it, so I just want to make sure that the connection is
okay.
Working.
I know, that's fine. That's fine. Put my husband in charge of my cell phone.
There you go. I love it.
You turned my knob.
This person texted you. I was like, I can't.
Right? Oh my gosh. That's the other thing. Teaching has been that kind of situation where the students are like sending me emails and they don't know which link to use. And even though we use the same one every time, and you know, they're making comments in the thing while I'm trying to talk and they want to know why I'm not answering. It's like, why don't you just turn your mic on and your video on and raise your hand? And I know you're trying to communicate. So anyway, all right.
It says live on Facebook.
I know it. That's what I'm a little confused as to what the problem is, why it just kicked me off. But it does say that we're live on Facebook now, so there might be a delay in what they're receiving. That's fine. So all right. So without further ado, it does say it on here again. Yeah, and I guess if one of you sees that kick off, just let me know.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, so I want to talk first about writing life and self-care in the writer's life. While our bios demonstrate how different our writing lives are, one thing we all have in common is that we're avid readers. How important is it for writers to be readers?
Absolutely important to me. And I have met a lot of writers, both published and students, and they don't think they need to read. And that just blows my mind. I think it's so important.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't be a writer if I wasn't a reader for a long time before that. So I don't know how people do it.
I think most writers, most readers are closet writers.
Oh,
You know, you you
right.
start out reading and then you start imagining stories on your own, and I think it's an important part of craft. I like to read as a reader, and I also like to read as a writer. And I have my favorite writers that I'll read over and over again to try to figure out how they handle the plot, setting, how they got from point A to Z, and to me that's really important. I also find reading to be really important when I feel stuck. If I sit down with a good novel, I often find myself getting ideas or finding different approaches on what I can do in my own writing. I think a lot of young writers, maybe they feel like if they read too much, they're going to be influenced by other writers and they're going to imitate them rather than find their own voice. That seems to be a big concern. I have to find my own voice, and if I read Elmore Leonard, I'll end up writing like Elmore Leonard. But that's not
Well, and that
that's
is
a bad
dangerous.
thing.
I mean, you could plagiarize without realizing it if like just
Right?
a sentence or something. So that is a concern. Usually, the thing that I think makes the most sense and the most I hear from other writers is that if you're writing a mystery, read comic books. I mean, read memoir, read romance, read anything but what you're writing.
Yeah.
And that way, you won't uh, inadvertently plagiarize anybody.
Yeah.
So that's what I try to do, but I love mysteries right now, so it's hard.
I think that as early writers too, that's more of a risk, while but if you think about any art, you have to be an apprentice first.
Yeah.
So you have to literally deconstruct what the masters are, what they've done in their craft. And some of that is mimicry. And you get
Yes.
really good at that mimicry. It's like you take, I kind of do some of that with my intro creative writing students and I actually teach this session for the National Writing Project. I do some sessions with the Meadowbrook Writing Project where I call them like I use mentor texts and we deconstruct them, and it's like putting a puzzle together, figuring out all the pieces that make the puzzle. And then once you get all the puzzle pieces and they're all labeled, then you peel the face off of the puzzle and then you put a new face on the puzzle. So you
Mhm.
can use all these different things and recreate something completely different, and maybe even like for instance, like all the stories that respond to Hills Like White Elephants. There are a ton of short stories that are, a rendition of that, and they use illusion throughout to pay homage, to say, hey, I'm not stealing this. I'm using the storyline in a more modern or contemporary setting, and because it's a worthwhile exploration. And you can look at these, and they're all beautiful. I
Mhm.
can't think of the names of them right now, but I'm gonna go and pull them out because I think that's a really great example of, how to apprentice and learn how somebody did something.
I
Um,
agree. I
but
think one of
poets say, a good poet knows how to steal lines. A
yeah.
great poet knows how to get away with it. So,
I,
Well,
I
a lot of contemporary writers right now are rewriting Jane Austen novels.
yeah.
They're and the Jane Austen book club. This was the one that was so clever. I mean, they had a book club, and each person in the club picked one of her books. She doesn't have that many. I mean, under under 10, so each person in the club picked a book. And then, oh, this writer, I can't think of her name, but she was so wonderful because the book they picked was right on for the personality. And there
Hmm.
were a couple of males in the group, and it was just so sweet. And it had so many echoes of Jane Austen. So when I see people do that, I think that is so cool. They do a lot with mythology now.
Right.
I just read Circe, and that was so good. Uh, you know, um, so there is a type of a homage, that's going on
Yeah.
too. Yeah, that's fair. I'm not equipped to do that, but that's fair.
Right. And I mean, there is a fine line, but again, I wouldn't have learned nearly as much if I wasn't a reader. I was an avid reader when I came back to school, which is really interesting. So I want to share this too because I didn't get to share this yet. So Cynthia was my first teacher coming back to Macomb, and I was in my 30s, so I was an odd woman out in the room. And I used to be an architectural engineer major. I came back and said, I don't want to do that. I want to write. And everybody said, you're nuts. What are you going to do with a writing degree? And I said, I had no idea. I want to write, and I love to teach. And so I said, well, I'll figure it out as I go. And so there are a whole supernatural chain of events. I ended up getting a seat that shouldn't have even been open. And this was on the 23rd of May, and on the 24th is when the class started, and I got this seat, and I show up to this class, and I'm in there for 5 seconds, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm home. This is where I need to be. And it was really awesome. But one thing, I never shared this with you, but I share it with my students, and I share it with people in really competitive situations. And I don't know if you remember this, but there were these two gals in the class who did not like me, and they did not want me to succeed, and they were always nitpicking really weird stuff. And you would always like try to get the train back on the tracks, get the train back on the tracks. And we were workshopping one day, and they were really like just picking something apart and just being like, and I was taking notes because I'll take all criticism, go back, right? What's constructive? What do I need to pull from this? And you said, hey, Jenifer, can you stick around after class when everybody leaves just for a second? And I was like, oh, snap. Like, I thought I handled the situation okay. I thought you did. And I thought, okay. And so you said, when everybody left, you said, don't listen to them. I was like, what? And you said, don't listen to those girls. They'll never have what you have. And it was a profound moment because beyond just handling the situation, you planted a mustard seed in me. And
Aw, that's so
so that was very instrumental because when you're at the earlier stages and coming in as a mature adult, while I had thicker skin, I didn't understand the system and patterns of rejection that happen in the literary world. And so I was questioning, am I doing the right thing? I mean, this was a big sacrifice for me to make. And, going home and thinking, I think I'm doing this thing right. I'm enough of a reader to know, like, I think I have some skills that, I mean, obviously that I can hone, but that I'm coming to the table with some skills. And then you sit down and you hear people attack you like that. And I was like, well, maybe I think I'm better than I am. And you said that, and it's just been something that has been a part of my backbone.
I'm
And
so glad. I'm so glad I said that. I don't
yeah.
remember saying it, but I'm so glad I did.
So, so thank you for being that. You were the first person to to just encourage me in such a powerful way.
Oh,
So,
thank you. Pass it
so
on.
when I talk about writers and mentors, I think about that.
Oh,
I've had a few, along the way who have been that same kind of, powerful dynamic in my process, but you were the first. So, so thank you for that.
my
Along those same lines, are there any particular mentors or people, writers who you feel like have been super instrumental in your life, or is there just too many and a variety to?
I I do have one who sticks out above all others. I was reading the newspaper, and there was a book review of an author who was a Harlequin romance author, and she got her MFA, and she got I don't know, $1 billion deal from St. Martin Press for hardcover women's fiction. And I never read any of her Harlequin romances, but I thought, oh, I have to read that book and see how she did that, how she
Right.
made that. And I got to be good friends with her. I took her name's Jenifer Cruzy. She doesn't
Oh,
write
yeah.
anymore. Yeah, but she doesn't write anymore. But she, I got to be internet friends with her, and she had a group. This was before Facebook, but we used to have those groups, those message boards,
I remember those.
and she you know, had one. There was a fan board, and she would come, and I started talking to her about writing. Other people wanted to talk to her about knitting and different things, and so she just helped me so much. I took a class with her in Ohio. It was for a week, and the thing I remember her first critique of my pages that I turned into her. She said, "You're a beautiful writer, but you have no conflict."
Oh.
And then I redid it, and she wrote back, "You're a beautiful writer, but you have no conflict." But that was true.
Here, yeah.
I don't like my characters to be upset. I want them to have enough money for food. I mean, I just don't like putting people in a bad situation, which is ironic since I'm writing, you know, murder mysteries now. And, but that's one she sticks out for me. She has a she has a book on writing that she's doing online with another writer, and
Mm.
if you go to her webpage, I think you can get a link to that. She taught me just about everything I know about writing novels.
Yeah,
You know, how to structure, and you know,
right.
I'm
so
going to check that out.
Jenifer Cruzy. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
she sounds familiar to me. I think I've read her. Marcy Dermansky is a writer that helped me quite a bit. I read a book of hers called Bad Marie, which is about a very unlikable character. Yet throughout the toward the end of the book, you get just a little bit of a glimpse of, okay, she does have some redeeming values. But I found a fascinating character, this Bad Marie, and I wrote her a letter and told her I just love the book, and so she wrote me back and put me on her emailing list. And when I was struggling with my first novel in the context of love, I contacted her, and she was doing editing, and I sent it to her, and she was really instrumental with my help. And you know, when you were talking about conflict and so forth, one thing she told me was that the the book needed to start at a lower point in the character's life than what I had. Start at the very worst and work your way on up. And I did
Mm.
that, changed the whole texture of the novel. So she was very helpful. Her most recent book is very nice, and it's a funny book. So Marcy Germansky, she's good.
That's these are, I'm glad that we're getting all of these names on record too, because I'm about to make some big changes in my career, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I can't wait to reclaim the missing parts of my life, which is reading what I want to read, and not grading student essays. um,
I hear that.
right. And so I didn't have as many like mentors as far as like who I was reading and who were also mentoring me until I got to grad school. And so I had a lot of great teachers along the way. I'm not going to say that I didn't, who were telling me, read these people, these people. Um, but when I got to the MFA, the director, Meg Carney, had said, fall in love with someone else's writing. And that
Yeah.
kind of, that flipped a switch in my, because I've been falling in love with people's writing my whole life, but that flipped a switch in my head as a student writer. that, okay, fall in love with writing and you're in this atmosphere. And I researched the school before I went there and said, I want to go there because I want these people telling me what to do with my writing. I want to learn from them because I'm very inspired by their writing. And so, you know, a lot of my mentors there were instrumental. Some of them I've gotten to interview for the magazine, like Laurent Basselar and Zbigniew Orlowski. The last two before this most recent with Olga in it. And so, you know, we started bringing in poets instead of just artists for the main feature, but like Kathy Aguero and who else am I trying to think of here? Oh, Anne Marie Ullman, Michigan author, right? So she's from my MFA, and you know, she's one of the first. You know, I love her creative nonfiction, but I love her poetry. And you know, these are some of the names that I first fell in love with. I started reading their work, and there are others too. You know, the list is but these are the people who really invested a lot in me also, and continue to follow my journey, and you know, applaud me, and they're, you know, proud of me, and that's, you need that lifeline, right? And we, you know, Cindy Frankel and I were talking last time about the extraordinary Metro Detroit literary community and how it really, and you know, my MFA group is pretty exceptional as well. And I have tons of friends who, you know, I continue to keep in contact with. But those people, falling in love with people whose work you admire, but also who are also mentoring your work, it's just this magical experience. I mean, it's just magical. And, you know, so there's something about the teaching writer. And I learned a ton about teaching from you and from these individuals who are practicing writers and who are teaching their craft. And it's really molded the way I teach also, and the way I'm, you know, constantly looking, as you know, continuing to learn, because we learn until we die, right? And so yeah, so a lot of those names really influenced me. But so now you have mentioned, or I mentioned in your bio, Cindy. I don't know if you want to start this. No, we'll start with Linda on this one. But I'm just excited about these different projects and series and things like that, because I can't wait to hear what you say about this. But anyhow, we talk about writing projects. People often ask writers how they get their ideas for projects, and their vast answers show just how individual this process is and how it differs from project to project. Since Linda has a great story about the inspiration for her new book, let's begin here. So tell us about your newest book and its inspiration.
Gordy and the Crab. So it's a story about a little boy who goes to the beach and he's afraid of the crashing waves, and then his brother tells him this horrible story about ghost crabs, and it comes a point where he figures out that he needs to save this little ghost crab from this girl who's chasing after it with a net. And I wrote it initially for my grandson, and I had written just, you know, it was just a little paper book like this that I had put together for him. For the last 35 years, we've gone down to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and one of our favorite activities is watching the ghost crabs. And I don't know if you've ever seen one. They're different from the regular flat kind of crabs. This is a ghost crab. This is my little buddy here. But they have boxy bodies, and they have eye stalks, and they scurry sideways in the sand. They build little like tunnels or burrows along the sand. So you'll sit down on your beach towel and, you know, what's that? What's that? You know, you'll see them scurrying around, and they are so freaking fast. 10 miles an hour they can run.
Wow.
They're mostly nocturnal though. So my daughter took Oliver, who was then 3, and granddaughter Lillian, who was 8, down to the beach one evening to look for them with flashlights. And she told me that there were so many of them on the beach, and one of them ran right across the top of Oliver's shoe. And that was it. He did not want his feet on the beach. He wanted to be held. He wanted to be carried. He wanted to go back to the house. And the next day, we went to the little village bookstore to find a book on ghost crabs, and we couldn't find one. We couldn't even find a book that had like a book about sea life that included ghost crabs. So my daughter said to me, "Well, Mom, you're just going to have to write him one." So that's what I did.
Yeah,
and I love that.
Expected, you know, I you know, I did, this was like sort of the prototype. And this is just my own copy, but I, drew it with magic marker and colored it in, and I pasted it inside another hardcover book to give to my grandkids. And I just had fun with the story, and I decided, why don't I see how far I could pursue this, with it. I never had an intention ever of writing a children's book.
I was shocked. When she told me she was writing a children's book, I was shocked. I know
Yeah,
her as a poet. I know her as the author of In the Context of Love.
yeah.
And I'm just like, what is she doing writing a children's book? And you told me that story,
Oh,
and
it's
it's a
really,
wonderful story. And I can't wait to, I already ordered it for my
yeah.
grandkids. I have 3 of them. They're each getting one. So it's such a cool story.
That is,
Thanks.
I figured there was some kind of inspiration like that where someone said, well, you have to write it. Uh, but it's interesting because I do know what ghost crabs are. I just didn't know that's what they were. When we were in the Outer Banks, we would take walks at night. And there was
Oh,
one night where there was actually a blood moon. And it was so cool, like watching this. It was like, it looked like it was hatching out of the horizon. And all of these crabs were scuttling across our feet. I was barefoot. And I was like, should I be worried? My mom's like, no, you're fine. And I didn't realize that, and I was like, wow, where are these crabs during the day? Because they're completely gone in the daytime, and you couldn't tell what they look like. In the
no, once in a while you can see them during the day. They'll scuttle out, but they run pretty fast back in if they sense people around. Where we go quite further south in the Outer Banks, and so there's quite a bit more of them down there. But yeah, they're really cool. They really are. Um,
yeah,
and well,
I love.
the brother, what I came up with was the big brother tells Gordy, that you don't need to be playing around those holes because they'll snip off your toes and they'll take them down and eat them. So this is like what he's thinking happens.
What? Oh my gosh, is that in the book?
Yes, it is.
You're traumatizing all the kids.
See, this is what Gordy imagines.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. But you know what? I was talking about conflict. I mean,
Yeah.
get them started early.
My most favorite storybooks for children are when something really surprising happens, and if you don't have a little bit of like moment, even for kids, it's a pretty boring story, right? So you have to have, just like with any writing, the character arc, and then the character discovers something, and then he has to be brave and stand up to this little girl and protect this little ghost crab, and teaches empathy and all that good stuff.
In my latest just mind blowing of Linda doing this book is she learned on what did you use Canva for your
No, I used my
she,
iPad and pencil, and I used Sketch, Adobe Sketch, to learn how to do the drawings. Because I went to art school in the 70s, and I had thought about illustrating the book myself, but I kind of put it off for a while. And then I thought, well, I might as well try. Why not? I had the skills. I just, I'd never drawn children before. I'd never drawn. I mean, how do you draw waves? And
I don't know
sand and all
anything.
that stuff. So it took me a long time to figure that out. And I probably about a year of just working with Adobe Sketch and getting a feel for what I wanted the characters to look like, and taking photographs of my grandkids and
Yeah,
body shape.
it's marvelous. When I saw that you did all the illustrating for that book, I was just blown away. But you have always, Linda was someone I admired as a poet before we became friends. So when I
Oh,
first met her at a conference somewhere, I'm like, I've read your poetry.
oh,
I was like a little fan of yours.
very cool.
Yeah, and now we're friends.
Yeah.
Linda has that way about her. She just absorbs you in. That
Yeah.
was, I can remember there were 2 different literary events, and I was like, in one of them, there was someone there who was like, just did this really weird, like had a manic episode with me. We're really it was very weird. And I was like, oh, that person's gonna be there. And so my husband and I show up at this event, and I'm like, don't leave me alone. And I'm like, not see this person. I'm very non-confrontational. If I have to, I will confront you, but I'm like, I'm here for ML, and I'm just like, I just started directing the Writers Guild, and then Linda sees me and just absorbs me right into her little table there, and I was like, that's Linda. Makes you feel like family, which is very awesome. She did that again with me at a writer's retreat. I literally showed up. I didn't know anybody really well. And I'm like, I'm just going to show up. You just have to go out of your comfort zone sometimes. And I'm like, and I needed a retreat. So I'm like, I'm just going to go. And she absorbed me right into the fold. So, Linda's one of those very special people who, she has a very healthy way of promoting literary acceptance. But speaking of healthy things, before we talk to Cindy about her larger projects, I want to talk about a few things here. But I'm sure we can all agree that maintaining a healthy writing lifestyle is a daily battle. So what motivates each of you to write? Is it this intrinsic force where you simply must write, or are there other factors to your success, like maybe time management, self-discipline, end game motives?
I have the intrinsic thing where I have to write, and I've got 14 books now, I think, or 13. And
Congratulations.
yeah, it took a long time to write that many books. And I was teaching, and my kids were home, and I had a husband, and I had to go grocery shopping. I had my whole life, and then I had my job, and then I had writing. So even though I wanted to do it, I didn't get to do it as much as I wanted to. But then once I retired, I was having like a book out every year to every 6 months, because I had scribbled in the summer. I scribbled down outlines and stuff. So I got a lot of books out. Now it's not, now after I've gotten a lot out there of what I wanted to say, I just do it because I want to get to the end. I want to see what happens.
Yeah.
And
that's okay.
And I even said, my husband retired in 2019. And I said, maybe I won't write any more books. I have a blog, so I always have my blog. I can write whatever I want.
remember saying that.
Yeah. And I was just like, maybe I won't write anymore. I had just finished a series. And then I did a standalone. It was a character from the series, but I moved her to a new location. So I thought, I think I might be done. But then we got a place in St. Pete, Florida, for when we retired. And I loved it so much. I was like, I want to write just one more book about this place, this setting. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to write one more book. And then it turned into a series. I don't know. I was trying to see how he would be. I didn't want him to be like friendless, not knowing what to do, not having any hobbies. He's golfing all the time. He plays shuffleboard. He's just, and we do a lot together too. So that's how I found out, okay, I can still write. And he and I talked about it too. So that worked out good, because he's very, he can handle we don't have to be together 24/7. We never have been. And it's, so, so I'm getting to the point now where it's like not so intrinsic. I don't have to do it, but here's the secret. Join a writers group, because and I mean a critique group where you have 4 or 5 or however many people, and you meet once a month and you share your pages, because deadlines. My publisher does not bug me with deadlines. That they'd like to have a book a year, but they're not going to like really push that. I went 2 years. I had a year without a book. So your friends, your writer friends, those people, they're not going to say anything, but in my mind, I'm like, I got to get this written for them, and
Yeah.
and it works.
No,
So
it's a great accountability thing. That
yeah,
is a great.
yeah,
I like
it's
that.
all
Yeah, I had a great writing group for my MFA, just a bunch of us. They're all fiction and creative nonfiction writers, but I write fiction also, and it was great. And so about a year ago, we just all got really, maybe a little more than a year ago, crazy busy. And it's like now sometimes we just try to do call-ins because most people are like, I can't even write, can't write the same way right now. But it is beautiful to have that writers group. I would love to. I've tried finding them here, and people keep telling me to start them, and I've tried that too, and I don't get into groups that you get good critique and good feedback, and it's so hard to find that community and
really,
cultivate it.
it really is.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's the ticket. Find people that you blend with. I've been
Right.
in so many groups, and I only have a few that
Now, is this a group that's in Michigan, or is this in Florida? You're
I do
writing.
have my group in Florida, which
Okay.
they're great, but
Good.
they're not, they don't write novels. One woman just wrote her memoir. I don't know if she calls it memoir or autobiography, but she just wrote that. And a lot of them, they'll write poetry. We usually just have with them, it's more fun. You just have Jennifer, what's that word I'm looking for? Where you have you throw out a word or a phrase or,
Oh, like the prompts, the kind of writing.
a prompt.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
there's a lady and she does the prompts, and I'm so glad that I don't have to lead that group.
I love prompts.
Yes, and I love writing to the prompt, and they're only a page or two. And we meet every week and we just read our prompts, and some people do them in poetry form and some are prose. And so that's just fun, and it's not like, okay, this is act two, this is the middle of the middle, it's falling down. It's not real scholarly. It's just a relief, and it's just lovely. But to get those people, actually, my group, two of them were students. um, I had one. I belong to Detroit Working Writers a
Okay.
while ago. I'm in a mystery writing group now, Michigan Sisters in Crime. So when I was in Detroit Working Writers, I met a woman who wanted to be in a writing group, and so she and I invited her to my house, and then it was the two of us, and then there were people coming and then not coming, and it
Mm,
wasn't really gelling.
right.
And then I got an email, two different emails from two different guys that had been my students, but they were my age. So we're all retired now, and they were my students, and they were emailing me about their writing, and they said, could you help me out with this or that? And I said, hey, I got a writing group, why don't you come?
Love it.
So too, I mean, you never know.
Right. No, I
Yeah.
love I love that idea too, because you're also like you're scouting, you're handpicking people.
Didn't even
Because you
know.
didn't have to tell them that.
No, they just wrote me emails out of the blue and they weren't in the same class or anything like that, but they're
Oh
like
wow.
best buds now.
good.
I
Yeah.
love I love that. How about you, Linda?
Me, I set a goal and then I follow it through, and it's probably as simple as that. I haven't been writing a whole lot of poetry lately, but I still do write it. But I don't feel a need to like flog myself every day and sit down in front of a computer and write a poem or write this or write that. It's just like, I want to get this novel finished, so I'm going to finish it, and
Yeah.
I'll just put time and finish it. That's always
Right.
That's the
yeah,
best part, finishing it. There's
yeah.
never a better feeling than when you finish it.
It is, and then you've got to go back and edit. Right now, I've got some ideas for editing. It needs a lot of work yet. The novel that I'm working on, but it's there and it's my goal. I often tell myself, when I'm starting a project, if I didn't do this, how would I feel in 5 years?
Mhm.
It's like with the children's book. It's trying to relearn illustration in a new medium. That's a lot. It's hard to do. And there's so many people that say, "Oh, I'm old. I can't learn computers, or I can't do this, or I can't do that." Well, how would you feel in 5 years if you never even tried to do it?
Yeah.
That's a drive. Like, not everybody has that, right? That's a specific, that's a discipline to be
Yeah.
able to
Also, being a little bit obsessive compulsive.
yeah, yeah. So unlike you, I did write one novel, and it was while I started when I was in your class, and then I spent the whole summer writing it, and it's horrible. And
I
so
have to write a few bad ones
Well,
first.
I wrote a starter novel too that never got
yeah, no, I know. But it was good practice for a lot of things. So I do book length, full book length things. I'm about to publish a self-help book, which is a full book length thing. And I
love
write,
self-help books.
what's that?
I
Wait,
love self-help books.
wait until I tell you about my outreach, but I'm gonna save that for a little bit. But I write memoirs for this company. So I interview other people and I write their life stories. And some of these turn out like novels. I've got some really great characters. They are characters, some of my clients. And some of them just turn out like, just like personal essay type of works. And they're all different variations of in between. And so I did learn a lot, obviously, from working with these full book length things and the arc and all these different things that have to happen and how to organize things, when to flash back and bring in backstory and all these people are like, how did you know how to put that here and there? And I'm just like, you just have to play around with things and then you figure out how the tensions work and how all these different things work. But I write a lot of shorter work. So I write shorter personal essays, short stories, poetry. My poetry is very narrative. And it's gotten more narrative over the years. And so I have multiple projects going. So I will write, a short story and maybe, I'll revise a poem or whatever when I get to sit down. And, I'm constantly composing in my head. If I go for a walk or I go for a run, or if I'm doing something, I'm thinking, even if I'm listening to music, I'm meditating on things. I'm observing, I'm taking internal notes and I'm writing things down. I teach in the summer for the Meadowbrook Writing Project. So I work in the mansion and I get to go around. I make up prompts and sometimes I make them up as we're walking around, like, oh, this would really be cool going together. And I come up with some of my best work because I'm like, I need prompts and I'm tired of doing the same old prompt because I do it, every week. It's over and over. And so some of my best work happens in the summer. And then in the fall hits and I have zero time. Like I'm just, last fall I was teaching 6 classes at 3 different colleges and I said I'll never do that again. And this year I only took classes at 1 college, three classes, but they're back to back. I had to split them in half. So technically I was teaching 6 classes again. And I was like, you said you want to do this again. But God has a funny sense of humor with me. And so, I'm going through that, but it's frustrating because I don't have a lot of time in the fall for my own writing. And that has to change. Like, I'm little by little, I'm realizing that, maybe I'm putting.
Are you adjunct?
I am. And so for the last
Take time off. That's what I did.
Yeah, for the last few years, I have been trying to, get full-time teaching and putting a lot of effort into that.
Yeah.
And I'm a spiritual person, and I've been like getting alone with God and like just discovering some things. And this outreach and the self-help book are something that hit me when I got laid off. And it was actually hit me when I was touring with my first poetry collection, and I was at a Detroit venue. And I'll just tell you quickly. I'll try to tell you as quickly as I can. And I was like, I don't know what to read. And the nice thing when you have books and you go to readings is you don't have to like print stuff out and figure it out ahead of time. But the worst part is you're driving there and you're like 10 minutes from the venue. You're like, oh my God, what am I reading? And so, I'm on my way to this venue, and ML just threw me kind of on it last minute. And so I was like, yeah, I'll make it there. But it was like December 18th, and I'm in the middle of finals at all these different colleges. And I'm like, okay, so I'm like, I'm going to read my working class. I'm going to read my sexual assault one. And then I like to have two pieces that go together. And it was a really weird night, but I read the pieces, and this girl comes up to me after the reading, and she's just like speaking directly into my purpose. And she planted that seed for like, I was like, oh my God, there's a whole bunch of girls out there who don't realize they don't have to carry their trauma around for their whole life. And I was discovering that in my 30s and even into my 40s. And so I got laid off. I had 3 classes. It went down to 2 to 1. And I'm like, what the heck am I going to do while I'm starving this winter? And so I sat down and I wrote like probably 80% of the self-help book. And then I couldn't do anything with it at the time. I still need to finish some stuff, and I researched and all this other stuff. But and I was going to publish it last fall. And then Diane DeSilla said, "Oh, get a publisher. This is too big. Get a publisher. Don't." And so I started trying to do that. And then I started talking with one press, and they were like 3 to 5 years. And I'm like, oh no, that's not happening. I don't have 3 to 5 years for this. This is hot now. And so I started looking at other things. I did find a publisher who's also, it's like a hybrid type of a thing. And so I haven't started working with him yet because COVID. It's like, but I am wrapping up projects. So now in the next probably 2 to 3 weeks, I'm going to start working with him, and all these awesome things that are, going to happen. But yeah, so I'm like, you need to, but I have all of these projects, and some people are like, oh, you have to finish one. And I'm like, you don't understand. It doesn't work that way. Like if I have a poetry, which is true, you do have to finish a project, but like I wrote about my oldest daughter had brain cancer. And so she had to have brain surgery, and she had to have chemo and radiation. I had to go live with her in Virginia. And so I had, I was away from home for a summer, and she kept saying, write my stories. And it was just like, she is a character. And so I'm always like, yeah, I'm going to write your story. She's mentally ill. And so she's like manic roller coaster anyway, without all of this. And so she kept saying, you got to write this, you got to write that. And I'm like, are you sure you want me to tell the world about it? And she's like, did you get that? And so sometimes I will call her and share something, and she'd go, did you get that? Yeah. And she's like, well, you got to write that story too. And she's like remembering things. And I'm like, you are weird that you want me. You don't care that I say this stuff. And so, but anyhow, it was a great project, but it wasn't one that I could just sit down all summer and write. I've been writing it for 2 years, and, piece by piece. And I finally just sent it out, and, hopefully it does well in this particular submission opportunity. One of my editors
sounds like a good book. I might need that.
She said, this is your best writing. And so I really feel like there's a lot of really strong writing in it. But I also have like a hybrid collection of short stories and poetry, and I got to figure out who could publish that, because some people like they want to it has to be one genre. But I'm like, these are all like oppressed women and their voices, and the struggles that they have finding their voices, or censoring themselves, or all the different things. And so all these different works communicate with each other. And that's just 2 of my projects. I have other, tons of projects that I'm just like, shuffling work into. And sometimes I just get inspired to write something, and I'm just like, and I'm going to slip that in here. It's, so it's a good problem to have, but I think maybe some people would be overwhelmed. Just like some people get overwhelmed when they see I have over 100 tabs open on my browser. but I'm okay with it. So, so it is interesting to hear how different people manage projects and finish one. Like, how many projects do you think you have going at one time? Is it just one project?
Well, I have every morning I wake up and I write in my journal. And that's nothing. That's just for me.
Yeah.
When I finish, I use spiral notebooks, and when I finish one, I throw it away in the proper garbage, not where people can come and take it.
You don't keep it?
No, because I tried reading a few, and they're boring. There's some parts where they're private. But I thought, I am not going to have my kids have to read through. I have sons, and I'm not going to have them have to read through all this.
Yeah.
I doubt if they
I
would.
journaled for years, and I got to a point where I said I better throw these out.
Yeah,
They were just for me. They were my
yeah.
purging.
And
Nobody
that's
else.
what I do every
If I
morning.
read them, I'd probably get depressed all over again. So just put them
Yeah,
away.
yeah. I don't even read them over before I throw them away. It's
That's
just that I like writing on paper with pen.
Mhm.
And so that's my morning warm up. And then if it's Monday, then I write my blog. And all the other days, I'm starting in my journal. Uh, if I'm at a point where I need ideas, I'll talk about my book and what needs to happen next and how I have this problem and how can I solve it. And then that's when I start ripping the pages out of my spiral notebook and putting them into the manuscript. So that's how I do the three. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
it works for me.
yeah, so before we move on to talking about these different genres and stuff we write in, is there anything you want to add, Cindy, about how you navigate these series?
Oh. Well, I just love series, and that comes from being a reader.
Okay.
You know, I did write down some of my favorite series because uh, Mary Carr, she's a memoirist, and she has a wonderful series. It's her life in, you know, pictures. But there are other, let's see, there's Alice Hoffman. She has 3 books on magic. I mean, one of them was turned into a movie, Practical Magic. And
Oh,
I just finished Magic Lessons, which goes way back to Salem during the witch trials. And these are strong women who don't let men drown them. And so they're all 3. And I love Alice Hoffman.
So do I.
Margaret Atwood had science fiction trilogy. I really love that one. So I do, and I read a lot of mystery, like Sue Grafton, the Alphabet series. Mysteries are known for their series characters.
that's
Yeah.
And
true.
so I'm like, I want to do that. Well, I did it and I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but it worked out and I learned some things, and now I'm on my second series, and
Nice.
I know how to do it better now.
And that's
Like I told you, the first series, the last book, there was 5 books contract, 5 books in the series. In the 5th one, she just couldn't stay in that little town. She had to go somewhere else. And so I'm just like, okay, well, I'm just going to do it. And my publisher is so good, they'll let you do whatever. So
Nice.
nice.
that's how I finished that one up.
Nice. I love
Yeah.
it. And we do. You learn, you have to do things, right? We learn through error. You have to try
Well,
things to say, oh,
I,
that's not
I
how
was
that works.
I was like, okay, I wrote this book, and it was this woman who got fired in the 208 recession, and she came up north to her family's cottage, and they had like it had been built in the 1920s, and she thought, well, maybe I can fix this up and it can be like a cool little beach getaway um, up north Michigan. And then, so then it was kind of romantic because there was a guy who was the carpenter. I mean, carpenters are sexy. I'm gonna see if my husband's there.
I'm going to tell my friend that I have a friend who is a carpenter.
And
My
so
husband was a carpenter when I met him. Yeah, I agree.
my thing is, okay, I had that book. She got her little, she met all her goals. They had their happily ever after, as they say in romance. And that was my first book. and my editor said, so you're not going to be following these people because they have happily ever after. And I was like, yeah, I know. I think I'm going to just have people come and stay at the motel and I'll, do it that way. But then it was like different people. There weren't, I wanted to have a community that was
Mm,
had continuity to it. So
sure.
that's what I learned the most. So that's what I'm doing this time. They're going to be the same people in all the books.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You're giving me ideas. I love, and that's another thing I love about these author talks is I'm like, oh, and I'm going to do this, and oh, I'm going to try that. Um, so, all right. So another thing that we all have in common is our shifts between literary genres.
Yeah.
And I told you guys that I, go between prose and poetry. I've always practiced both styles. And I actually had a couple of teachers in my undergrad time who said, you can only get good at one or the other. And it used to be like, oh, I can't, oh, I know it's not true. And they would say, it's very rare if somebody writes both well. And I am like, I'm
What
not
about
giving up one.
Margaret Atwood? I mean, she writes the best poetry and she writes phenomenal fiction. There's a million
Any?
people.
I know, I know them now. I discovered so many of them and I was just, but I mean, I'm glad I didn't listen to those people because I just kept saying, I can't, it's like picking what, you can only pick one of your kids. Like, no, I love them for
No.
different reasons. And, I've always just continued to practice it. And I really feel like, and people tell me this, even some of my clients who I write these memoirs for, they're like, oh, your prose is really lyrical. I really like that. And I'm like, I would never have learned how, right, the cadence of speech and the sound patterns and things that just come natural to me now. Sometimes I'm like, that was lyric, I'm thinking it's kind of boring. That was lyrical. And then I go back and read it and I'm like, oh, I guess when you scan it that way, it has that, that kind of appeal to it. But same with my poetry. My poetry, when I first started writing it, I was trying to look at classics and it was very vague and like abstract and what the heck are you trying to say? And then when I started practicing my prose and like how to tell a story, how to set up the tensions and all those things helped my poetry just go to a totally different level. And so, and there, I could go on and on about all the different strategies that I bring back and forth. But you guys specifically switch genres. And like Linda talked about, doing the children's book.
I
But
know.
you,
Blows my mind.
what's that?
It blows my mind that she did the children's book, but it's so great. I mean,
But you
and
did
what is
too.
that- no, she did,
You
Linda.
didn't, but you wrote, didn't you do a children's lit too, or no?
Well, no.
Okay, wait a minute. You had, was it a young reader? What did you have? Because you shared it, the cat story.
Yeah, the cat story. My mother wrote that.
Oh, I thought you wrote that.
Yeah, my mother wrote it, but
Okay.
how to finish it.
That's pretty cool that your mom was a writer.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that's the story that everyone loves in my first book,
Yeah.
and it was about a cat in that we had, and she like got about halfway through it and she couldn't figure out how to finish it. She didn't have the skills or and she asked me to finish it and help her, and this is when I had kids, job, writing, husband, work, and she asked me to finish her book and I'm like, Mom, I can't even finish my book.
Right.
But then when I was doing the teaching, I needed a children's story or a young A story, um, because of my students. I wrote that book because of my students, and students want to write a lot of different things.
Right.
They want to write songs, they want to write this or that. That's the only thing I never wrote. So I called up my mom and I said, Mom, do you still have that story you wanted me to help you with 10 years ago?
Let's finish it.
And she said, yes. And I said,
Cool.
oh, good. Oh my God. She wrote it in pencil and it was almost, you could hardly see it. It was so faded. But we did it. And honest to God, I have gotten more compliments on that story in that book than anything else I've ever written.
Well, I still remember it, but what surprised me about it was how unexpected it was. because
All her ideas.
yeah, it was just an unexpected theme. It was unexpected, and I was like, oh, this is really it opened up to me, like, stop thinking about just the types of, the I should say the reading level or the audience that I was writing to. Like, you can learn from all these different things, and so it really opened things up for me. And then because of that story, I took children's lit right away when I got to Macomb, and I met Laura Gabrion, and we worked together on the Meadowbrook Writing Project for years. And now she's taken a job in Detroit, and she's not on the project anymore. So now I have to, like, we've lectured before together at these side by side symposiums and stuff, and so she's been a great asset to me also. But that, and then studying the children's lit, really helped me not think about, like, I don't know, people keep saying you have to do children's books, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'll write one down. Like, you guys are inspiring me, but I'm like, but YA,
Yeah.
that was instrumental for me. And so I write for an adult audience and I write for a YA audience. And so like, that was that. So to me, that kind of opened it up, even though that was a little bit younger than YA, but to say, you can write for different audiences completely altogether. And there's still some things that have to happen here on the page.
Well, Alice Hoffman and a couple other of my favorite writers write children. Louise Erdrich, they
Yeah.
write children's books and they write adult novels. And
Well,
so, and
So
they,
there's many overlaps.
yeah,
You have to have a good plot. You have to have characterization. You have to have the character arc. You have to have a challenge. You have to throw in an unanswered question. I mean, there's all these basic things that are the same, and it's the same even with poetry. You need to have a shift or a change somewhere in the poem where the narrator realizes something that he or she didn't know before.
Right.
And I think those are elements, I think, that are in memoir and poetry, in children's writing, young adult and adult.
Yeah.
And I think the more you learn, the more you find there is to learn about anything.
Oh, for
Anything,
for sure.
anything ever. And to me, that's what's really exciting. To
Yeah.
just keep learning and learning and learning.
And yeah, exactly. And you just don't know where it's going to lead. Like, so all of this leading up to my first book. Now, I had multiple projects. I certainly didn't want my first publication to be my coming of age stories. Like, I'm like, I'm not the most interesting character. And so I'm like, can't you publish something else? So I'm shopping around. I have like 4 different manuscripts that I'm sending out. And I'm like, you know what? I know that one's going to get picked up first. And sure enough, that was the one that got picked up first. But I couldn't have written half of that book had I not had the insight to not to just write to that audience, but to get into that character. Like, there's something about getting into a specific character, which I can do now in all different settings. I can get into, even for my clients, I can get into their 6-year-old head.
yeah.
And sometimes they're like, oh my God, how did you do that? And I'm like, practice. But you have to be able to be exposed to all of these things. So even being well read in all these regards, but you have to practice it also.
Yeah.
Reading is not enough until you actually start to try, right? What's going to work and how exactly does this work?
Conferences are big for me to learning, going to conferences,
Oh yeah.
just going to classes. That was huge. I went, when I started writing mysteries, I went to the Writers Police Academy, and it was in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and it's taught by private detectives, homicide investigators, and they take you through. I mean, that was like so helpful for me for mystery.
Oh, sure.
And the one mystery that's the single title that I did, I did that, and I of course read 10 books. Everything I read 10 books on how to do it. And my dad never read any of my books. He's a reader, but he reads like hard-boiled mysteries.
Mm.
And so that one I thought he might like. and I gave it to him, and we met for dinner. And he said, "How did you do that?"
Oh, wow. What a
Just looked at me and he said, "How did you do that?"
The best compliment, right?
Yes, from my dad.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah.
This is really helpful too. I went to the Rochester Writers had a conference, children's writing for children and children's literature, and I learned an awful lot from going to the listening to the illustrators because I had to learn. If you have you have the children's the script, so to speak, or the text. You have to learn what part of that text you're going to illustrate
Right.
so that the children want to keep turning the page to see what's going to happen. I mean, you don't want to be so literal in what you illustrate. And with Gordy there was a lot of imagination. What he imagines these crabs do when they eat the
So,
toes, a hot dog bowl. I mean, that's what his brother.
you're going to get the messages, Linda. Great. Now my kid thinks he's going to get his toes eaten.
Well, I have to show it to my grandson because grandson's nickname is Captain Careful, and he gets kind of freaked out about things like this. So I had to, he was kind of like, now does this scare you too much? The first illustration I had was of a ghost crab holding a hot dog and little toes with toenails and everything in it, and I thought, nah, that's going to be a little bit over the top. I need to change that. So I,
Don't traumatize them from eating hot dogs.
but that conference really helped me to understand, children's books and how they need to unfold. And
Right.
so, yeah, conferences
Never
are great.
stop learning. Never. I think you said that, Jennifer, at the beginning.
Yeah.
We can never stop learning.
No.
We can learn from other writers. We can learn from conferences. We can learn from our friends. We can
Yep.
never stop learning.
Exactly. And networking. Like never stop learning and never stop connecting with like-minded people.
How boring would that be if you were a writer and you didn't know any other writers?
Let me tell you, it's
Thank you. Crazy.
horrible. No, I'm telling you, so that is my experience. When I left Macomb, I cultivated a really great, strong writing community with a handful of other people. We would have meetings. They would be standing room only. We had people in the community coming. And I went to Oakland University thinking it's a bigger school. It's got to be better. And no one would even accept me. And I was like, I
had that too.
was a loner for a couple of years. And I was like, I wanted to just be done with school. I was like, I hate this. Nobody likes me, blah, blah, blah. They're not giving me a chance. I couldn't find a writing group. And I went to a workshop with ML and I had written some new poetry. I was with the National Writing Project at the time. And so I was under some great leadership and I was writing some really powerful stuff. And ML was like, who are you studying under? You have to keep going to school. We need you. And I was just like, I don't want to go to school anymore. Nobody's nice to me.
When I had my master's degree, they didn't have an MFA at Oakland. I don't know if they do now.
No. I went to Boston.
They didn't even have creative writing. They didn't even have
I was the first graduate by mistake. Like, because I came over thinking they've got their liberal arts college. I'm like, they have to have a creative writing thing. And so I just transferred over and got there and realized, oh snap, they don't. So I started working with the integrative studies, and we made up this curriculum. But in order for us to make up a curriculum, they were about to come out with the creative writing one, but it wasn't going to be done in time for me. And so we had to pick a program that was so radically different from that so they would approve it. But then it was like, this isn't a creative writing thing at all. I was having to study so many different things. I'm like, I want to become an expert at something, a fine focus, not take all of these classes. And so I literally just got it approved. And then the college came out 2 days later and said, here's the program. I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, I already have almost all the credits I need. And so I ended up going and having a couple of things grandfathered off. But I was there. I had to wait 6 months to graduate because Arts and Sciences hadn't released the program yet. And so I had to wait to walk. And so here they just announced the program in December, and then I walked in December.
Yeah.
They were like, how do you already have a graduate in this program if you just released it?
Way back in the dinosaur age, they had what they called the master's project.
Yes.
And so I asked my advisor, can I write a novel or a novella for my master's project? Short stories. And okay, here's what she said. We don't have anyone creative here.
So you couldn't even have an advisor oversee it.
Oh man.
Yeah, I did women's friendships in Victorian literature. You know, I like it. I like Victorians. I like the Regency. I love Jane Austen. And so I was okay with that, but I was wanting to write my own stuff, and
Sure.
we don't have anyone creative here. I thought, what a sad statement.
Really?
No, it is. And it's hard too when, like, I love a lot of the instructors at Oakland University. So I mean, no disrespect, but because I didn't start off my education there, I didn't develop the same kind of relationships. Plus I was older, that I just didn't connect as a student. I've connected since, being a student, but while I was there, it was like, there was no community at all. But I want to get us back to this talking about topics. And so on the other side, talking about hot topics, some of us, I think all three of us, we have to bring in these adult themes into our work. Specifically, how do you handle these sex scenes or, intimate interactions with your characters in your writing? So in particular too, I'm just reading, Mike. So how do you navigate the nuances of sexual interactions on the page, but do it in a way that presents meaningful experiences for your characters and your readers, and that they don't come off as laughable?
Yeah, there's so many good sex scenes. But Linda, we got to talk about this. You read Erica Jong too, don't you, Linda?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Linda and I both really like Erica Jong, and she's very. She writes.
She's really explicit.
Intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, intense sex scenes. Yeah.
Yes, and then even her poetry is just really cool and wonderful. I think you have to go beyond reporting just the mechanics of sex.
Instruction.
I actually wrote erotica for quite a while. I had two pieces published, and one was nominated for an award, and then I kind of got away from that. But in my first novel deals with sexuality of a young woman. She's coming into her own, and then her mother has her own issues, and they conflict. So there are some small sex scenes, but what I tried to focus on more is like what's going on in her head, what's going on in the room, what the room is like, what the couch feels like on her back, and different images like that, rather than describing what goes where,
right?
Because we all know that, and it can be really I don't know, there's so many different cliches and words that
very difficult to do well.
It is. And so you've just got to kind of focus, I think, on the emotions of what's going on, and have them fail a little bit, have his leg get caught in his pants, or have his her elbow hit him in the mouth, because that's the way, it's not always satisfying either. I mean, whenever I'm reading a book and I read the characters are saying like, oh my God. Well,
I know.
Can't we go beyond
learn
that?
But I think we learn from, I was just going to say, like, everything you're saying, yes, this is how
You do.
You learn from the bad ones. Like, I read so much bad, and sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I can't even handle this. I have actually emailed a couple of people and said, because I know them, hey, if you ever do sex scenes again, please hit me up, because I'm going to tell you what she is not thinking, what she is not saying in that moment. Like, this is ridiculous. And so you want to have believable stuff, but there's those like where I'm just like, oh my God, this is horrible. And so you learn a lot, like from watching people do it horribly. Like I'm thinking of a famous author who I've learned a ton from, like what not to do is Murakami. And so the Wind Up Bird Chronicle, but what's the other one? The Kafka on the beach, or Kafka on the shore. And I taught that book once and I hadn't read it yet. And we got to this, like, it was so bad. And I'm like, oh my God, and I sent out an announcement to my students. I'm like, can we just skip page here to here? You're not going to miss anything important. Unless you want to read really bad sex scenes, go ahead and read it. But if you want to be spared, you skip to this page. And we'll get it.
Very, very difficult to do well. I got some advice from Jenifer Cruzy about sex scenes. She said, don't make it about the sex.
Right.
Yeah.
About the relationship, make it about where
Exactly.
they're at in their relationship. And I
Good.
think that's nice. Yeah.
That is good.
I kind of got tricked into having to write sex scenes in my first series.
Yeah,
I was real excited that I got a contract for the series, and I read it all, and it said, you need a consummation scene. There's things you must have. And I thought, oh, consummation. Okay, well, I can kind of blur that a little bit. And then I sent that to my editor, and she sent it back to me, and she said, no, honey, you can't blur that. You have to, it has to be the consummation. And I'm like, how am I ever going to do this? So I looked up who was the best sex scene writer. And she had some articles, and I read those, and it's only a paragraph every time. And my mother says, I skipped that part. I skipped that part, but it's only, I don't think anybody's really, really good at it if they're like Linda said, if you're putting
focusing on the mechanics, in other words. Yeah. Don't need
Right. It just comes off as bad porn.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
even have it be funny, like the examples, Linda, that you were giving us, the elbow and the.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather read something real than.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's either that extreme, or then it's like the Hallmark version, the Hallmark movie version.
Really bad metaphors, right?
Yeah. So, right. It's like, okay, if I could just
shutting the bedroom door, and then let them do everything, but the door's shut. That's what I would prefer to do.
Right.
And that's why I'm writing mysteries now, because I got a new contract, and I do not have to have explicit sex. So I'm happy.
There you go.
I don't mean us, honey.
Right. You could just wake them up in the morning after they.
That's it. That's it. I mean, there's a reason that there's the worst sex scene award,
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, all right. So let's move into this beast of publishing. We all have some different experiences with publishing, be these indie, traditional, EPUBs. What types of book length publishing have each of you done, and what was your experience with these?
Well, I can only speak, I guess, to the small press publishing. And for me, it worked out really, really well. I mean, you don't, big publisher, you get an advance. With a small press, you don't get an advance, but then on the other hand, you don't have to pay for anything either. So it works out really, really well.
I got more royalties. Did you get high royalties? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. And they, and whether it's a big publisher or a small press, chances are you're going to have to do a lot of your own publicity anyway. So, you need to learn that. And I think it worked out really well. I mean, I was able to pick out my, with my first novel, my book cover and everything like that. So, I mean, with my second novel, I'm probably going to try to get an agent. But, for my first novel, I did have an agent. And we worked together very closely. And she was very, very good. And she really helped me fine tune the novel, but it didn't get sold. Yeah. And people were telling me, well, why don't you self-publish it? And I thought, well, I guess I could, but there was something that held me back. And I'm so glad I didn't self-publish it at that time. I mean, I might have been successful later, but I went back a couple years later and totally revamped the novel and changed the point of view. And it came out to be a much stronger novel than I don't than it ever would have if I had jumped the gun and done it, right when I was being rejected by editors. So, I worked with her for about a year, and then she asked me about my next book project, and I started working and on that. But um, and so when I revised the novel, then I just started seeking out small presses on my own. I just start, you just query them directly, and worked out well for me. So
I was in a writers group. I've been in a lot of writers group. I recommend them.
yep,
And I had a book done, and I was working. I had an agent, and I was working really closely with an editor too. And I mean, my book was this close to being published, and
mhm,
then the deal fell through.
happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
And I said that in the meeting, and one of the ladies that I was sitting next to said, "What's your book about?" And I told her, and she said, "You should try the Wild Rose Press." And that's my publisher now. And I think I
yeah.
have 8 books with them. But before
Wow.
that, I self published. My first book that we were talking about, that was for my students, an instruction manual. That book,
Oh,
there was not even Kindle then.
Yeah.
There
yeah,
was, there was no way to do that yourself.
yeah.
So I found, well, it was nice because my students had to buy my book. So I had an audience, and I had, the bookstore had them on the shelf, and it was nice. I was in between, who else did they have? Natalie Goldberg.
I hate that book.
I know, you really can't teach out of that book.
No, it's like, okay, great little snippets of inspiration, but there's no, and it's required if you're an adjunct, you have to use that
Yeah,
book. And I was
yeah.
like,
Oh, really?
yeah, I refused to read it as a student, and I had to teach it last year. And I was like, this is so I had to come up with my whole new, because I couldn't make them buy another book, so I had to have all these PDFs of things I wanted them to read. And I was like, this is obnoxious. So I just kept trying to find like free, what's already out there for free, and creating the pages that they could just go and read
That's how
these.
I wrote my first book. I had to make it up as I went along, and pretty soon I had, like, this many pages. And the copy lady, she would copy it out. And at Oakland, I even had one too, where they'll bind them and
Right.
put your name on them, and then students have to buy them. Well, that was just so I wouldn't be copying every day, like, and I couldn't find anything that worked. So that was my first book, uh, where I said, I'm gonna I'm gonna try to get this published the old-fashioned indie publish way, before Kindle, before any of that stuff. So I had to find a printer,
Mhm.
and there was one in Ann Arbor. And I looked at Natalie Goldberg's print, her font, and I took the book in to the meeting with the and I said, I want this font, I want this color of page, I want it to be this big, I wanted it to fit right next to Natalie Goldberg.
I
And
loved it.
so
What a gas.
they did that. They did that for me. And I had a friend who was really good, like you are, Linda, with art and graphics and computer and getting all that together. And she did all that for me. And then my husband and I drove down to Chelsea, Michigan, and picked up 3,000 books and all these boxes, which I had in my basement. I think I only have 10 or 12 left.
Good
Good
for
for you.
you.
That was my first book, but of course, students were forced to buy it. you
That's
know,
how you're supposed to teach, though. You're supposed to be able to have your textbook with your lessons, your right, I mean, your collected, ideas and how you want to run your class.
yeah,
Most, but adjuncts don't usually have that opportunity to do that. And so
I
you
was
were in a really
lucky.
great, unique situation.
Yeah, I was lucky. And then I did, before I got the Wild Rose Press. So Kindle came out in 2007. My book came out just a little bit before that. And I just did a couple. Now I'm trying to think what they're called. uh, fantasy novels. And so I did that, and I put them on Kindle just to see, because
Yeah.
it's like, what is this new thing?
Yeah.
And then I got my publisher, and I never put anything on Kindle again. So
So
I've done each one.
so yeah, you've done all three of those. So now, just moving right into marketing, you know, I see. So for me, mine was a small press, no support at all. As a
No.
matter of fact, my publisher was kind of taking notes as I was trying to self promote myself and making trial and error, like I didn't know what I was doing, and learning as I was going, and seeking out sources. And so he's made a lot of concessions since then, but it was very frustrating to go through as a new author. And
Yeah.
I reached a point where I was like, I think I have like maybe 60 books left, 65 books, but I realized that I haven't really met my readership for this book yet, but I will meet my readership when I launch my self-help book. Those are my readers, and I just haven't met them yet. And it's a wonderful problem to have, and I'm really excited about it. So once I figured that out, I was like, stop killing yourself to try to sell one book at a time, and focus on these other things, and focus on learning how to do the marketing, which is why I'm partnering with this hybrid, because I want to learn, how do I tap into other writers networks? How do I get certain people who are influencers to help me in these initial stages? And what platforms do I use, and what do I do on each platform? And so I'm excited to learn that. And of course, you'll be seeing me on social media, and I can't wait to do it, because for me, I'm going to be, so right now I'm working on, I told you, the big career change. Not only am I launching this, I am going to, I'm going to try to register Pink Panther Press as a nonprofit press, and learn all of these things, and then start representing underrepresented voices. And I already have my first client for this project, and so I'm super excited about that, to work with him. And he's a former student too, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Great story. He has his own nonprofit, and he works outside of Flint with troubled teen boys, and he's got a great story. And so I'm like, oh, how do I make all these things work together? But I don't know. So my learning curve is huge, but I've also learned a ton of things as I was going about the publishing industry and my work with the magazine itself, which under this. I've learned so much, about working with different writers and artists, and, working with an editorial staff, and all the nuances with things falling, just like falling apart, like this last issue. I just moved my daughter to New York, and I rented a house in the Finger Lakes on my way back, because I'd never been there. And I'm like, just isolate a place. And I had so much work to do on the magazine, and I was literally finishing it on the ride home. I had my data on my phone, and I was literally finishing editing it, and I got home and I published it at night. And I was like, this is crazy. I had an editor who's like, oh, I can't give you that contribution piece. And I was like, so I have to write another piece. And I just didn't have, and I was like, okay, make it smaller, make it more important. But you learn a ton from also the pressures of things falling apart. And I had a lot of people say, just don't publish it. What's you're the boss. And I was like, no. This is 11 years. It has never been late. So I don't care. I'm just going to take a few pages out, make it a smaller edition, and it's going to be good quality, and it's going to come out on time. It's coming out on the 8th of September. And it was like everything I had to do to get that to happen. So I've learned a lot there, but the marketing side, I'm like, how the heck?
Linda is really good at marketing. I'm bad at it. I don't like to market.
Well, yeah, you've got to be active. I like Twitter. I like Instagram. I like my Facebook page. Although the Facebook page, I don't know that I get that much from anymore. But blogging helps too. Doing at least weekly or every other week keeps you active, and a lot of it is networking and reaching out to other writers and connecting with them, and then they in turn help promote your work. I know before, in the context of Love came out, I did a lot of lot of graphics on my Facebook page where I took direct little quotes from the dialogue and little snippets of dialogue and put them together with imagery and then just posted that. And it just seemed to create a buzz. And I had a lot of people that were telling me, I can't wait. I got to read this book. It looks really good.
Yeah.
I'm going to do
And
that.
What's that?
I'm going to do that. You told me about
Yeah.
that. And you use Canva.
Canva.com. Yeah.
So you like, is it like a trailer type of thing that you're putting together, or more like just images in a scene?
Just a single graphic image. If you go to my Pinterest page and you look up in the context of love, I think I've got context of love quotes, and there's all of them, all of the graphics that I created for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. But in Canva is a really nice tool because they have templates for Instagram, templates for Pinterest, for your LinkedIn banner, for your Twitter banner, for Twitter posts, and they're all in the right size.
Oh, nice.
So all you do then is pick a background, or you can upload your own backgrounds. You can choose text, and you can make the text bigger, smaller, and for me, I really dig it because it's graphics and it's art, so it's a lot of fun.
I'm just starting to learn that.
And then you download them. It's a great tool. I made a book trailer for Gordy and the Ghost Crab, and so that was nice because I was able to use the actual illustrations, and then for the text I went into Canva and I just created like a little template. I think it was called under Documents, and just put the text in there and then save those as images. And I used is it iMovie on my iPad.
Okay.
And you click and choose and put them all together, and then you add the music. And book trailers are great because you can put them on Instagram, you can put them on your LinkedIn, you can put them on Facebook, you can put them on your author page, or like your Amazon author page and your blog. And you can even, there's even a way, I can't remember how to do it now, but you can put it into your email signature. Have your,
No, I never do any of that. I'm very bad at marketing, and I'm always looking at what you're doing, Linda.
If you're not, you have to promote yourself. I can remember years ago, are you familiar with Margot Lagatuda?
Yeah.
Poet. She used to do a lot of promotion of her own work and other people's work, and the writer's voice, and writing programs. And she used to do writing workshops, and she would always have, anywhere she would go, she had flyers and she would hand them out to people, or she would have her books available. And some people used to criticize her for being so aggressive with her marketing, but damn it, who's going to do it better than you?
Right.
There's nobody. You have to do it.
Right. For sure.
And, you don't want to be too annoying or, too much on your friends, but there's other places and other sources, and you got to do it.
Right. And sometimes you have to invest in, and that's why I'm making this investment. I've done a lot of research. I've tried a lot of things. I've done webinars, and okay, let me work with this mentor who does this thing. And I'm like, there's still some stuff missing that I will never be able to do on my own. So now how am I going to plug somebody else into my network that I can't do it all either? So it's like, you have to learn where to bring experts in and pay them. Where do you invest money into these things?
That's a tricky thing, because I hired a publicist and I paid a lot of money for her, and that was a real mistake. It's a real bust.
Trust me, I have
got me 2 interviews. One was a radio interview, and I forget what the other one was. Boy, that was a mistake.
Yeah, and I've got a little bit of experience. When I first, when I was in grad school, I was co-editing some ebooks for Solstice Lit magazine, and I was like junior co-editor for a couple, and then co-editor, and we had to do all the PR stuff, and we're learning about the nuances, and we had 0 budget, so we had to find like all these free resources. And one of the authors I worked with was so uncooperative, and I would be like, you have connections, I can't just get you an interview. You've got to get me names of people to reach out to who you already have a relationship with. I don't know anybody in your network. So you got to get me the information so that I can hook you up with these gigs. And he was like, you're not doing anything for me. And I would just say, share the link to this thing I created on your page, right? Like it, share it. I'm like, this is simple stuff. And it would just be like, we would just shake our head like, we can't get this to work if you're not working with us. And I was working for free.
Yeah.
I was doing this for free. And I was like, I mean, and I put a lot of time into, but I learned, right? I learned a ton from the experience. So, that's not wasted, but it's very interesting to hear, because you have to be your best promoter, and to have
Yeah.
someone who thinks someone else is just going to make all that happen.
No, and I know a lot of authors that are really good with making doing like live Facebook things, just clips and stuff like that. And I think that the live Facebook things and the live Instagram things, or the stories, I think last and get a little more attention than just the static posts. So I have to get practiced in that.
That's where I'm getting trailers ready. That I'm collecting, and I have parts of them. I'm not ready to publish them yet, but I'm getting trailers ready specifically for this book and the
That's what
outreach.
stories are about.
What's that?
That's what stories are about. I keep looking at the stories, and I'm like, well, it's going to disappear. Doesn't it disappear after a certain amount of time?
Just
Yeah.
Snapchat, right?
I don't want
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Certain stories and certain aspects that
Oh.
stay.
Yes, I'm sorry. The stories do, but
Yeah.
but most people are posting that on their page as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does disappear. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I don't even use that because I'm like, it's another thing to manage. But Linda, you just reminded me of something, because you were telling me one time, and I said, oh, I'm going to come and be your student on this. How you do this thing on Twitter where you create groups, and then you can just that would be awesome if you would just do a talk on that. That would seriously be an awesome. I think a lot of people would be interested. Yeah, whatever you're doing, because you were explaining it, and I'm not going to do it justice, but you were talking about how you create these groups, and then how you're able to go to that group, and that's the only thing that shows up on your feed.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And you were like, this is how I network, and this is how I help promote other people, and I meet them and they help promote me. And it's like an underground world. No, it's like a rave. I want to be invited to the rave.
Every time I go on Twitter, which is like maybe twice a week,
right?
He's always on there.
No, she's very good about going
twice a day at least on Twitter. And you can also set up, there's a couple different apps. Twitter, what's it now? Hootsuite is one of them, but you can actually program tweets. So you could set up a whole week of tweets.
Same with Facebook.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's a smart thing to do during downtime.
Yes. But the most important thing, I think, on Twitter and Instagram is to interact with people. I mean, I have gotten interviews and I have gotten radio shows from Twitter, and I've gotten readers on Instagram. So, it can be done.
Mm-hmm. But I also noticed too, like, people have asked, like, this is kind of a little bit digression, but people ask, like, I don't know if people ask you, oh, what are you doing with all of your extra time during those lockdowns? And I don't have extra time. I'm actually busier. And time seems to be like this molasses type of moving thing where it's like, it's just very surreal the way time feels like it's moving.
Yeah.
But one thing I have done, and somebody said this to me, and I don't even remember who it is. I'm sorry if you're listening right now and you're like, that was me who said this. I kept saying, I'm not getting these opportunities, and I really need a sense of community, and I need stuff like this. But someone said, I really want to see author talks and artist talks. And someone said, well, you just need to do them. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. And so I literally was like, so this was in March that this person said this to me. And so in April, I said, okay, I'm going to do a live reading every day. Some of them are other people's work. Some was my work. I'm going to do something every single day for every day in April. And I'm just going to get comfortable with seeing myself on the screen, hearing myself, and just going to practice. And who cares if I only have 3 people who see it? I'm doing it. I'm practicing being in front of the, being in front of this camera, which is a totally foreign thing for us. My kids, they're like, oh, TikTok, all the different apps that they have, Snapchat, they're constantly in front of the camera, and they're not self-conscious of that. So, so kind of thinking about like, creating those environments, or, how do I fit in somewhere? Sometimes it's just like, just do it and start making it happen. And I have no idea. Like, I'm like, I have ideas of people I want to reach out to.
Yeah.
There are so many, but it's like, don't overthink it, Jen. Just, just
Yeah.
start doing it.
Reaching out to us, and Linda, thank you for coordinating it, because I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have known.
No,
Yeah.
I'm so excited. She just emailed me like as a simple question, and I was literally like, well, I'm like, you can say no, but if you wanna just use the platform and I'm just not in it at all, you can do that. Or if you want to do a three-way conversation, I would love that.
And
And
fun having the three of us. I love it. I still don't think I could do what you do. I could not make a magazine. I could not uh, illustrate a picture book. I could not do a talk, but I'll
I
come.
could write a mystery.
that's just, we don't have to do everything. That's the beauty of, it's like when you think about like you think about a community as like a body, and you think about the body has many parts, and all of those different parts have different functions, and some of those parts work with other parts, they're connected to other parts and they feed off each other. But we don't have to do everything. That's why we have to surround ourselves with people who complement us, and
Your
hopefully
magazine in print.
it is. And so if you want a print copy, you have to go into the Mag Cloud. You can go to pinkpanthermagazine.com, and there's always like a link on, I think it's the top. There's like a banner of 3 images, and it's the top left. If you click on that, it'll bring you to the Mag Cloud. You can preview it for free right there. Or if you go to the purchase option, you can download a free PDF, but you have to go through the purchase option. It's a little confusing. But you can also buy a copy there. And the print copies are a little bit more expensive because they come on art stock paper. And I've tried looking at like, I'm trying to cut the price down, but every time I get a demo, it's like that thin magazine paper and the images bleed through and it's horrible quality. And I'm like, okay, no, I would rather sell less copies of this and know that the artists and the writers who are the ones buying the most copies are super proud to have that copy. Their stuff is in this high quality publication. And so eventually when I get my press going, I will develop a relationship with someone and get it for less. But I think with shipping, it's like, it comes out to like $20 an issue with the shipping.
I'm proud
So
of you. I think it's
thank you.
wonderful.
It's,
I did look a little bit around to see all what you're doing, and I was just like, oh my gosh.
yeah, I'm having fun, I'm having fun, and I do have my hand in a lot of things, but I'm starting to clean up a few things. To obviously I need to free up some projects and time. But I'm really excited about this next season and getting started in it. And
Cool.
yeah.
And you said you held your book off because of COVID. You didn't
Well,
you
I've
didn't
been busier. So my husband and I own a carpet cleaning business, and we do viral disinfection. And so we have been crazy busy during this shutdown. And
I
so
bet.
we've probably um, our workload is like tenfold more.
wow.
And so just with that alone, so I went from having very little, like I could do once a week, I could be okay. Now it's like every day I'm doing things, and I have to stay on top of a lot of things. And there's just a lot of different like legalities and all these other things that I have to worry about that we really didn't have to worry about before, extra trainings and certifications and making sure my employees are certified. And all of that's really tedious and time consuming. And then I have all these book projects I'm working on for this company, and a lot of them, deferred. But once you push stuff into my fall term, it's like I'm exhausted. Like I can only work so many hours in a day. And so I'm kind of at that point now where I'm a little bit fried out. And but stuff like this that we're doing right now, that re-energizes me, and kind of recalibration.
Yeah.
So
Good.
Well, are you gonna work on campus? Do you know?
so I'm done on campus for this term. I did accept one class so far from Saginaw Valley, and it's supposed to be a face-to-face, but if they're calling off already, I doubt it will be a face-to-face. And so I'm okay with whatever. I mean, wearing the mask all day does make me sick.
Me
Um,
too.
but it's one class. So like right now I'm teaching, I have to wear it for 5 hours, and you're talking for 5 hours, and that's exhausting with the mask on. But one class would be, totally different situation.
Yeah.
So, and I won't stay on campus. Like, I'm not going to sit around and wear the mask and try. I'm like, you know what? I'll do virtual office hours. We'll just do this stuff online. But yeah, so one class would mean that I have, good quality time to get back to my own writing and focus on, like, I really want to focus on, obviously, the distributing and publishing the book. But my thing is that I really need to be able to go out into the world with the book. That's why I deferred. So it wasn't that I thought that I couldn't sell it, because I can start getting it into the hands of the people, people who like the teens and the young adult girls who need the book, but also the professionals who service them, right? So that's kind of the thing. And my connection to them is really the professionals who service them. That's my quicker in to, meeting my audience. And if places are shut down, if I can't safely go there, I'm not going to stand on a stage with a mask on, try to talk to a room full of people with masks on. It's not, is it safe for them to even be here in this room with me so it's like,
Yeah.
That's been like, you know what?
No.
I think we're going to need this more, because you already know that sexual assault and physical assault trauma happens more when you're confined to your house.
Yeah.
And so I really think, like, I'm like making peace with the fact that, okay, it might just be being delayed because there's going to be a bigger need for it when we're coming out of this pandemic. So,
I'm hoping in the spring to be able to go down the Atlantic coast book, and I'll take my little crab with me.
Yes. Oh, I hope that happens. That would be fun.
It would be, and I think that bookstores are open now. They just limit how many people come in. So I think it'll work out well to be able to go into bookstores and gift shops with a copy.
I was just going to say, gift shops, you're going to sell more of that in gift shops than anywhere else.
Gift shops and bookstores, and hopefully in this summer, who knows if there'll be, shows like, book shows or book that, what do they have? I'm trying to think of the word for it, like arts and crafts, things like that.
Right.
Books, because I've noticed children's books sell really well. It's hard to sell fiction in those kind of shows, but kids' books, man, they fly. So
all the grandmas are out there, and they.
I know.
That's true.
Yep.
You got to get it into Crackle Barrel. No, seriously, every time I walk through there, I think about the things that sell the most, and
I know.
Yeah.
True.
So
Cracker Barrels all along the coastline there.
There are, all up and down 75. So
yeah.
Well, I'm trying to see if we've pretty much covered so much. So obviously, let's just close up with any of our self-care. So I know Cindy had mentioned in a previous conversation that that's an area that you really aren't as intentional with, and Linda is very intentional. I'm very intentional too.
My husband is too. He works every day too. I don't walk, but for self-care, I do meditate. When we're in Florida, I walk on the beach. I love barefoot in the sand.
Yeah.
I do that. And I meditate, and I do yoga, and I read.
So you do have self-care. So for me, I struggle.
The thing I don't have every day. She's out there walking Clemmy.
Right? No, I love that she has a very specific routine, and I do envy that, because mine is very sporadic. And again, I've got my hand in too many things, and so part of it's my fault, but who could predict that this would be the way time moves for me too?
Yeah.
And so I have to literally and I've gotten good at this even before the pandemic, literally just close the laptop, like go for a swim, go for a run, go for a walk. And it's
Yep.
different times of the day where I'm like watching the weather, like, okay, you need to get out there in this window. And a lot of times that window closes. And then I'm like, shoot, do I, right? Do I still go out? What do I do now? And so I'm really bad at it, but I call it my escape artist antics, because I really feel like I'm escaping from the things that I need to be getting done. And so I started making it fun. And so like I paddleboard. And so sometimes if I have to go to like a doctor's appointment or something like around here, I'll strap my paddleboard into my little car, into the trunk. And like, I know I'm 10 minutes from a lake. So I'll go to my doctor's appointment, and like sometimes they'll be like, is that a paddleboard hanging out of your trunk? And I'm like, yeah, I guess where I'm going after I leave here. And I'll go and paddleboard for a half hour, put it back in my car, come back home and get to work. And I've had to make it this fun little, like, you're getting away with something you shouldn't be doing, which, for me kind of makes it more rewarding, but I need physical outlet. And it seems like Linda does too. And that's probably another.
I do. I have issues with depression, and the only thing that really helps me is to get those endorphins kicking, and I have to do it at least every other day. I have to get my heart rate up for a certain amount of time, and so it's if I'm not biking, now my dog is slowing down, so it's kind of I almost have to jog in place now while I walk her, but that's what I do because I've got to, or I'll walk her, I'll bring her home, and then I'll run or something, or I've got like a set time, like at 4 o'clock, I like to watch Nicole Wallace on MSNBC. During that time, that's my time to watch her. I'm not going to sit on the couch and do it. I'm jogging in place. I'm doing calisthenics. I'm up in my room where my TV is. I've got bands. I've got weights. I've got a ball, and I use that half hour to put the phone down or put the work down and just sweat for a while.
Nice. No, that's totally, you're speaking my language. I do the same thing. My kids used to say, why are you doing sit-ups? I would do sit-ups on every commercial, and then right, lunges or whatever. And they go, why are you doing that? And I would say, well, when else am I going to do it?
Do your stretches, whatever, in the evening.
Exactly.
I get too cranky. If I don't, I get cranky.
That's me. My kids will say to me, and they, like, since they were little, they would say, and I used to do much more running. And they would say to me when I would start getting cranky, Mom, when's the last time you went for a run? I think you should go for a run. And I used to, at first I would get mad, like, you're calling me a witch right now. I see what you're doing here. And then I started to realize, like, no, they're my love language for myself. And they don't want me to be crabby, obviously, but more importantly, they want me to be happy and comfortable in my own skin. And they know that does that. They just, right? I didn't have to tell them it makes me feel better. They saw how Mom was after she went for a run. And so I'm like, how insightful that they would make that connection, and then they would encourage me. But it was very funny. Like sometimes now that they're older, they'll say, yeah, you need to go for a run. Run some of that off.
Well, this is wonderful.
It was. So I want to thank both of you for letting me join you.
Well, thanks to you, because I'm not technical. So I was just so happy when Linda said, oh, we got this person and she used to be your student. And I'm like, let's go, let's do it.
Yeah, so I'm really excited, and I am behind. I got to get Linda's up too. Cindy's up from the previous one, but I put the videos on the website.
Okay.
And I just got software within the last 4 weeks for the podcast, and I just need time to sit down. It's literally just plugging in the file and stuff like that, but I still haven't had a moment to do it. So I will. Eventually there'll be a podcast, and when I throw it up there, I'll just tag you in a post and say, hey,
awesome,
check out the videos and the podcast on the page. So,
all right.
So and I'll be in touch, Linda, because I'm definitely going to figure out how to get you to show us that Twitter thing, and maybe the Canva thing, and how to streamline through different. So we'll talk about how, and if you're interested in doing that, but that would be a really great. Maybe I don't know, right after the new year. Getting organized, right?
Okay.
So, all right, ladies, Thank you very
right.
much for joining me, and thank you all who have tuned in. I hope that you're just as inspired as we are by this conversation. All right, exactly, right?
Bye.
Mwah. Uh,
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.